Well, hi everyone. Today I have an update for you on the Millennium Tower in San Francisco, that ongoing saga. But the information I've used in the video here is based on independent research. I again had a collaboration with ValueSpace. They provided satellite-based InSAR data. If you want to know more about ValueSpace, I have a link in the description. So I'm going to show you the settlement data that we have from radar images at the top of the Millennium Tower building and present that to you here today and compare it to the data that's in their periodic monitoring reports that they published on the building department's website in San Francisco. Now, my most recent video on the Millennium Tower was how the prices for these units have dropped precipitously over the last few years, over 40% actually. And then I've done two recent videos talking about this InSAR technology. So I don't want to repeat everything that I've said in those other videos, so you can check out the video on the Corolla Bridge update from Dresden, Germany, as well as the Rancho Palos Verdes ongoing landslide in California. I'll cover a few highlights of what this technology involves, but I really want to get into what's going on with Millennium Tower. So ValueSpace provides an analytics service where they obtain the European Space Agency's InSAR data from the Sentinel-1 and 2 satellites. So here's a typical radar array. The wavelength of the radar signal is 5.6 centimeters. By comparing the data from consecutive overflights, which are 12 days apart, you can determine if there's a change in surface elevation. And this satellite, or these satellites, take a polar orbit. Now let's just, as a reminder, show you this area of San Francisco where the Millennium Tower is located. So the address is 301 Mission Street. The red dot is actually for Salesforce East Tower, directly across the street. Now, when ValueSpace looks at an area, they select the points or the area for points to be used in the analysis. So you can see they've covered several blocks in San Francisco here, and they did find something rather noteworthy with the satellite data for this building. So we've got this area 1, and so they've generated a plot for all these points within this area. So their plot is from the period of May 2021 to May 2024. So they selected a 3-year window. May 2021 is when they started excavating to install casings as well as install piling for this so-called perimeter pile fix that is on 2 sides of the building. In fact, if we go back to the satellite image, you can see the vaults that have been excavated adjacent to these 2 sides of the building, and that's where they installed the casing and the piling to extend to bedrock and then attach it to the existing 10-foot thick concrete foundation cap for this building. So let's look at what this data is indicating. And they have a couple of callouts here. I'll go over that in a minute. But overall, we're typically seeing on that side of the building, the southeast side of the building, about an inch of movement per year, about 22 millimeters, relative to the other side of the building. So the first callout is January 2023, where they first started their first stage load transfer. So they were jacking against the pile that was connected to this pile cap for the building. So the idea is they wanted to provide some fixity on the northwest corner of the building, which had previously settled the most, and then force the southeast side of the building to settle more to try and level out the building. So what we can see overall is the displacement going back up. So it's no longer settling, but it's going back up at the time that they applied the jacking. So that's a very strong correlation. So the jacking against the piling, and then it's continued to settle since that time. So overall, we're talking about an inch of overall movement here. Sometimes there can be some noise or variations in the data, but the trends are clear. You have increasing amounts of settlement over time. And again, these are the points on the southeast side of the building. Now, as I mentioned, they being the consultant for this perimeter piling upgrade, as they call it, and they were issuing these reports on a weekly basis, then bi-weekly, and they seem to be less and less frequent now. I'm recording this video on October 12th, 2024, and the most recent report is for data through July 28th, 2024. So I don't know why they've gone 2.5 months since they've updated their data reports. But one of the things they're tracking is the individual load on each of these 18 perimeter pile. And they're also tracking the sum of those loads. And they have an action level if the total loading among the 18 piles drops below 16,200 kips. That's what they call an action level or reportable level. Presumably they would reapply loading when that would occur. But again, these are data reports. They don't really provide any analysis or explanation about what's going on or what they plan to do. And I think that's by design. But oddly, earlier in the year, the slope of the decrease of the total loading on these pile was such that you would have expected that the action level would have been reached sometime this past June or July in 2024. And for whatever reason, the total load has totally leveled off and is no longer decreasing. And currently it's about 16,400 kips and has been for some months. And what's also cool about the account that I have with ValueSpace, they've been doing the analysis, so I can just pick my own points to see, kind of iteratively or interactively work with the data that they've compiled. And this greenish yellow area is a rectangle that I defined. So looking at our user specified area, and keep in mind you have red points, blue, orange, and green. So in the area that I've defined, it includes all those across essentially the top of the building. And you can see overall the maximum differential is about 2 inches of settlement. And on the northwest side of the building, it's largely stopped moving, as you would expect. But the southeast side of the building continues to settle a little bit, which is apparently what they had planned. But I have a lot of concerns about the potential for cracking in that foundation with this amount of differential settlement. When you fix one side of the building and you let other parts settle, not to mention questions about the seismic performance. Typically you don't want to have what's known as a heterogeneous foundation in earthquake country. You want uniform support, uniform soil conditions across the footprint of the building foundation, and clearly that's not what they have here. And of course you'll know from my previous videos, I talked about when they started installing the casing for these pile back in May of 2021, by removing the soil, they initiated additional higher rates of settlement. And so that's reflected in the plot of these settlement points throughout the foundation. And this is what this plot looks like through July of 2024. So essentially the plots on the upper portion of the graph are at the northwest corner of the building for the most part, and the points on the lower portion of the graph are on the southeast portion of the building. So just looking at it in broad strokes, the maximum differential settlement is about 2.4 inches or so. So let's look at these individual differential plots over time. This is the contour of settlement. So what they're calling here is differential settlement, which is really the difference in settlement amounts over a given period of time. So they started this back in May of 2021. This was just a week later, so the settlement totals are negligible. Now we have September 2021, so not quite 4 months later, and we're seeing about 1 inch of settlement on the northwest corner of the building. Keep in mind, the piles haven't all been installed to rock, and they haven't been jacked at this point. At the northwest corner, we're up to nearly 2 inches of settlement. In the southeast corner, about 0.4 inches of settlement. And now June 2023, about 2.3 inches of settlement in the northwest corner, and about 0.6 inches of settlement in the southeast corner. So April 2024, about 2.3 inches of settlement in the northwest corner, and again 0.6 inches of settlement in the southeast corner. So things are slowing down in terms of the difference in settlement amounts. And again, not much change between the end of April 2024 and the most recent report, the end of July 2024. So if you look at the orientation of the settlement, the contours run from the northeast to the southwest. So it's like a hinge, if you will, where the one side of the building's been hung up now. You know, keep in mind, most of those larger settlement amounts occurred before the jacking load was applied. But yet the southeast side of the building continues to settle. And we saw that again reflected in the satellite InSAR data. So again, this is the plot that was generated from the area that I defined across the entire footprint of the top of the building. And the green, the yellow, the blue, that's all on the northwest side of the building, and the red lines are on the southeast side. So again, very good correlation with what we're seeing from the data report. And what I like about this is completely independent data. We're not relying on the consultant or the city of San Francisco to say what's going on here. And you could use this methodology to assess many buildings throughout an area. Now there can be challenges in downtown areas, particularly if you're not dealing with one of the taller buildings in the area, just because of the line of sight. The radar is at a 45-degree angle relative to the ground. So you could have taller buildings relative to a shorter target building essentially create a shadow, and you're not able to get reflections off the building of interest. But that's not a problem here because Millennium Tower is 650 feet tall, and it's significantly taller than the adjacent buildings. So fortunately, the Millennium Tower in this case is much taller than the adjacent buildings, and I think all but one case at 650 feet tall. But the images here were generated from a good quality data set according to value space. So again, there's very strong correlation with what we're seeing from the data report here for this building. So I think it's a very exciting technology. I'm still learning about the best use cases for this technology relative to what they call asset management, keeping an eye on buildings, retaining walls, bridges, pipelines, other civil infrastructure. I think this technology's been around for a while, but it's, I think, vastly underutilized. So I'll continue to bring what I know about this technology for specific cases that I'm covering for these videos on this channel. And of course, I'll continue to bring you updates about the Millennium Tower. Again, it's an ongoing saga, but I think the people involved with this building are going to great lengths to try and keep their building out of the news. So it's going to take more independent research and putting together various bits and pieces of information to really understand what's going on, what the future holds for this building. So at this point, I want to send a shout out to the channel members. I really appreciate your ongoing support, as well as those of you who provided super thanks. That's another great way to support the channel. I'm going to roll credits at the end here. I have a variety of new videos coming up. I have follow-ups on stories I've been following for several months now. So a lot of new interesting things coming up on the channel. So I really appreciate everyone's views and engagement and comments. So please stay tuned for future videos.